Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to the December edition of our Economy Markets and Investments Update, branded as EMI. So, without much ado, let me start off with the first slide. As usual, we'll focus on the world economy first. And in the world economy, the story is that pre-COVID absolute levels having been crossed, now global GDP is starting to track the pre-COVID growth path. So overall, the story and what we've shown in the graph here is the G10 countries, right? Their path, and so you can see the world economy recovery is well on track, not only reaching the levels, but on track to look at the progress the world had thought about before COVID hit it, right? So that's really good news in terms of the speed of the recovery, right? In the next slide, you will see that this is not just true of the world advanced countries, but the BRIC economies, which are the emerging countries, the big four, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China. Even there, the same story. In fact, there, if you see, it's currently already matching the growth path, the forecast, right? So, good story on the growth path. We know, of course, there is a one big concern which we'll come to. But what this is doing, the next slide will tell you, is that inflation across the board has been rising, whether it's in global or in emerging or in developed markets. And as you can see there, the green line is the emerging market. So clearly, emerging market growth, this inflation has gone up, right? And India is also there among the emerging markets. And what does this tell you? This tells you that emerging markets are essentially suppliers to the advanced countries, right? So the reason the CPI is higher is because there's a supply side inflation which today is dominating. While the world is coming sharply back to demand-driven growth, the inflationary pressures are coming from the supply side, which is commodity price rises or oil price rises, metals price rises, and the like, right? So you know the implications of this inflation on the Fed's actions, which we shall cover at a later stage. So moving on now, right? Let's focus on the US because the world looks at the US as a kind of a harbinger of the world itself. And every day all of us they start our day by getting an update on what the Dow or the Nasdaq did. So from an economy perspective, right, you can basically classify economies because economies go through cycles, and we have chosen this particular methodology now, where an economy goes through a downturn, then there's a recovery, then there is the repair work, and then there's the expansion, and then followed by the next downturn, right? Now if you look at the red being the downturn, what happened this time is from red, it went downturn to repair, and from repair, it's already gone to expansion. So can you see that the recovery step has been skipped? So very rapid kind of recovery, so there's hardly any time on it. But the V-shaped recovery, you can clearly see. So the US is, in fact, rapidly returning to the growth path, and the latest Fed indicated that there are demand-side inflationary pressures also beginning to be seen, which is why they acted the way they did, right? The next slide, right, will tell you that if you now look at the US as a services plus manufacturing kind of a thing, both of them, the demand is what the advanced countries depend on for their GDP growth, right? And so the goods consumption, right, has been very strong, partly because of the money that was doled out by the Trump and the Biden administration to the people, and partly because the US essentially is a spending economy. So you can see that the glide path trend line, it's really shot way above that, and after a dip due to the second wave, there is again a sharp rise in the top right. So goods consumption has been very strong. The next slide tells you that services consumption is yet to catch up with that trend line. And that's where the promise of the future arises, because 2022 could be the year this catch up takes place. So again, strong services driven momentum would help the US economy. Moving on now, right, to the next, right? So as I said, right, the biggest risk to this growth is COVID. So where are we on the COVID? So the COVID, if you see vaccination wise, right, the UAE, for example, leads with a 99% kind of a vaccination rate. So clearly more than half of the advanced countries have completed a significant proportion of vaccination. The world average is at about 56%, and India at 59% is just above the world average. But overall, there are a lot of emerging countries which have gone past India and are catching up. So on a vaccination, there's fairly reasonably good progress. India specifically, we will tackle in a little bit later, right? But The key story is that from the vaccination to the impact of the Omicron, and now if you see the first wave and the second wave, India's new cases and daily mortality continues to remain contained, right? So the good news is that even with that level of vaccination of about 59%, our mortality rates and the new fresh cases rising have been contained very well. The next slide uh, will show you that while the Omicron variant has seen a sharp surge in daily infections, it is not led to hospitalization or death. So one of the readings here is that the Omicron spreads very rapidly, but it's not as fatal or as severely impacting. In fact, it's more like a more severe cold or influenza, right? And the impact of that you can study from the country where Omicron originated, which is South Africa. So there you can see the first wave, the second wave, in the third wave in South Africa, and the fourth wave is the Omicron wave. You can already see that it's not rapidly as rising as the previous waves, right? So it gives us a little bit of confidence that Omicron, while it may spread rapidly, should not impact growth, because I don't think it's likely to lead to lockdowns, right? Moving on, right? So from back to India focus. So where are we? As I said, we are at about 60% in terms of total population vaccination, right? 90% of adult population, right? That's the thing. And we think that by 10th March, if the government is able to double the go at the current rate, we should be able to reach that level. And if we double the rate, then even by late January, we can reach that rate. So India is making rapid progress on the vaccination front. In fact, today we have surplus vaccines, and we have government is allowed export of vaccines. So overall, from a COVID perspective, I think reasonably things under control. Omicron, as it mutates and develops, right now the variant of Omicron is not very fatal, is not affecting. But coming days, if that worsens, could be a negative for growth. So we'll have to wait and watch. But right now, I think the government has done a fairly good job in terms of controlling the overall COVID situation. So moving on to the economy now, the Indian economy, right? The first trigger that we look at to judge the economy is how is the government's purchasing going through. So government does all its purchasing through e-way bills, and as you can see, after the second wave there was a strong recovery. Post that, the third wave at this end, you have seen a slight slowdown during the last month, right? But overall e-way bills has been pretty good, except for a small bit of softening by the end November. The next slide will tell you about what's not going well and what's going well. Within the two-wheeler, contraction is happening. So demand for two-wheelers is not yet picked up to pre-COVID levels, but passenger vehicles contraction is seen easing. And this also, you should remember that passenger vehicle sales is not so much a demand problem also, because supply also. Semiconductors, which today are a big part of new cars, there's a big severe worldwide shortage of semiconductors, and that's why probably this is also showing a contraction. Next slide shows you that even tractor sales is softening after seeing a record growth on the back of two very good monsoons, right? So there's again a softening of tractor demand. Next one is that overall, though, motor vehicle registrations, though they're showing a V-shaped recovery, have not yet normalized to pre-COVID levels, right? So the auto is still playing catch up. On the housing side, however, there's good news. As you can see on the slide, both new launches and new sales have been fairly strongly rising. And I think this augurs well, because housing has a multiplier effect on the economy, as we've spoken in past webinars. The next slide, right? What I'd like to point out is that the overall improvement in the Indian economy, we don't realize it sitting here. But one has to look at it that if you look at it over a decade, 2000 level and then 2016 to now, the average distance covered by trucks has dramatically increased. What is the reason for this? First, GST came in. So at the border between states, there is no need to stop for sales tax and central sales tax and state sales tax and all of that. Second is the quality of roads has improved so much that they're able to go at much higher speeds. So this is a huge saving. And if you look at the next slide, it will tell you that from the logistics, almost from a 5.8% efficiency level, the current efficiency has improved to 4.7%. So we had a 1.1% improvement in transportation efficiency in the country. So again, this is something which in some ways will not lead to that much, because the inefficiency also causes GDP growth. So it may actually lead to a slower GDP growth, but overall it's very good from a savings that it passes on to the economy. Next. Right. So overall, to summarize, both the manufacturing and the services PMI, which are good lead indicators for the next few quarters, are showing levels above 50 and are showing a rising trend. So which means that the GDP footprint that comes out when the data will show a positive trend on the back of manufacturing and services. So to summarize overall, despite slowdown in the two-wheeler segment and in certain other cases that we saw, overall manufacturing and services is set to remain upbeat. Next, right? And another harbinger of growth is how credit grows. So this is a very long slide over the last 21 years. Credit growth obviously in 2003 to 8 was at record levels, but ever since December 17, we have seen the latest credit growth chart start to slow down, hit a bottom, and as you can see, there's slowly now a recovery happening in credit growth. Because credit growth happens means that there is demand for bank funds, and that happen only if the economy is on a recovery mode, right? But one of the things to remember is that if you looked at it, manufacturing services PMI was rising, but there was certain domestic demand which was short. So you will see that the growth in India is also now supported by an external factor called export growth. So if you see here, I've taken again the two-wheeler segment. I was saying domestic sales is not picked up, but exports of two-wheeler has shot up through the roof. So today, India is not just a purely domestic economy. We are rapidly becoming internationalized, and there are very many segments which are going to benefit from world growth reviving, and that you can see in the growth in the domestic company, right? So while exports has grown up, a lot of these exports are also needing imports. So when India is being used as a manufacturing destination, there's imports, processing, and then exports. Plus, when Indian economy recovers, a lot of India's goods are imported, right? The semi-finished goods and the raw materials. So imports actually has been rising faster. Now, this might be a worrying thing from a trade deficit perspective, because that feeds into the fiscal deficit, but it's a good thing from a growth, because when India grows, always the imports grow, because we don't produce everything that we need in terms of raw materials, right? So I think this is again, while from a economy fiscal deficit perspective, it doesn't look so great, but from it shows that India's growth is happening quite fast, and that's why imports are surging quite a rapid pace. Next slide. Right. So now let's turn our eyes onto the unemployment side. The unemployment rate, right, is very critical, because especially as you know, the halfway through this journey between one election to another, the government's focus turns towards employment, and hence sectors which generate employment will get specific support from the government, like the real estate, construction sectors. So here what you're seeing in the terms of a print is that unemployment, which had shot up during the first wave and during the second wave, has now come back down. But of late, right, with this Omicron thing happening, you're seeing that the urban unemployment is slightly going up, the yellow line, whereas overall unemployment and rural unemployment are pretty stable. Now, if you disaggregate this unemployment, right, next slide, you'll see that in manufacturing, the jobs are still below pre-COVID levels, right? So where are these jobs? These jobs are largely in the space of agriculture. So if you look at the breakup here, Feb 20 to November 21, agri is the one which has expanded, industry has contracted, and services has expanded to some extent. The next slide will give you further detail. Services sector has picked up with the opening of the economy. So if you see within the services sector, personal services, tourism, education are the ones where employment has expanded, whereas in the other sectors like financial, others, admin, there, IT has seen a strong, in fact, I'll show you the next slide. Next slide, please. Sharp increase in IT hiring is happening because IT has seen a good time. The pandemic has given a boost to IT related companies and their business. And so hiring is at a record high, and the wages are also going up. There's wage inflation happening in the IT sector, right? So next slide. But overall, if you look at it, right, and look at the export growth that's happening between over the last 5 years, right? China has grown at 10% per annum. India still lags behind at 8%. So the China plus one narrative, we have a long way to go to catch up in terms of growth rates. And the countries which are really taking advantage are Vietnam and the China substitute, Taiwan, right? So India still has some way to go. And so then when you go to the, put our attention over to the government side of things, right? So first thing there is that private capex, if you look at all that is happening, right, with demand in the two-wheelers not yet picked up, not yet. So obviously capacity utilization is still low. So private capex announcements, while they've happened in specific places where there is a PLI driven thing, like, metals, electronics, IT enabled services, right? There is some announcement, but overall there is not a big strong thing in terms of capex announcements from the private sector. We have to wait for the PLI scheme to pan out for that to happen. Next slide, please. Right. Now we'll turn our eyes to the fiscal situation of the government. There, when you see, right, so you've seen one of the important things here is that the government's receipts have actually been very buoyant, much higher than expectations. So you see that there is a receipts growth of about 10.7%, right? And 17% has been the expenditure growth, which was in line. So broadly, the fiscal deficit of 6.7%, which we expected broadly, is in line. So there is likely to be, at the current rate, no negative surprises on the fiscal front as we run up to the budget, which is very, very critical from our perspective. And one of the main contributors to the revenue here has been the GST, right? And ever since GST was introduced, in March 21, on the back of a recovery of post first wave, we saw a record high. After that, the second wave again brought a dip, but now we have reached a level of almost that peak. So we're the second highest GST collection on record in the last month. So I think that augurs well, because only if economic activity is on a upswing will you see GST collections also rise, right? So next. So the other thing which is very important is states, right? Now the states also, if you see, right, their non-debt receipts, obviously they borrow money and that's part of their receipts, but their non-debt receipts has actually grown at 104%, right? And their expenditure obviously is higher, or they all run a fiscal deficit. But the beauty is that this expenditure has crossed the pre-COVID levels, which is very good. And the non-debt receipt also has crossed pre-COVID level. That is, we have indexed that at 100. So from that point of view, it's good because income is improving for the states and they're also spending more, which is good actually for the development of the country. So now where does the does expenditure take place? Where is the income coming from? The next slide will show you. So spending is on capital expenditure. The red line tells you that 130 indexed number, if you go, it's 130 capex expenditure. So if the states are spending on capital expenditure, that has a multiplier effect on the economy. So their revenue expenditure has been more or less flat, and where they're spending, the additional spending is happening on the capital expenditure, which augurs very well from a GDP perspective. The next slide tells you the breakup of their income. And where is the income coming from? The receipts, it's coming from sales tax, excise duty, stamp duty because of registration, and from SGST, which is allocation of the GST to the states. So overall, all of these are indicators of the underlying economic activity. Like stamp duty indicates construction and real estate activity, SGST indicates economic growth happening at the state level also, so they get a share. So I think this overall is a very good sign for the future GDP growth of the country. Next. So where they are spending within the capex is that transportation, housing, health, and education. These are the four areas they are concentrating on. And within this, transport and housing definitely have a multiplier effect on the economy. Next. Now we move our attention to the markets. And in the markets, we all know it's a flows story with the markets. The flows for the right-hand side graph tells you that though FIs recently for the last few months have been pulling out money, the amount of money they put in the first half of the year is so strong. On a calendar year basis, we are still $6.7 billion positive FII flows. Domestically, last year was a bad year for mutual funds and others to get inflows. Customers were redeeming and they were also not buying. But this year, there's been a dramatic turnaround, and you've seen from a minus 56,000 crores last year, this year we are plus 40,000 crores in terms of flows. So flows from FII supports large and large mid caps, and flows from domestic MF supports large, mid, and small. So now these flows, if you look at it from a FII perspective, right, we know this tapering has been spoken about, and the Fed is now expected to peak at June 22, but ECB and Japan both are going to stop their tapering only by the end of next year. That is, Bank of Japan is November 2023 and ECB is February 2023. So there is going to be some liquidity flowing in from Europe and Japan into their economies and to the world markets. The Fed is going to stop with June. But when you talk about tapering, please remember one thing. Tapering is of the additional flows every month. So US was pumping in $50 billion a month. That's what they're going to stop. But the liquidity that is already there, they are not withdrawing. So there is enough liquidity to get reallocated to various markets based on the potential already floating around from the Fed. Okay. The next slide tells you that in 2020, because of this liquidity surge, almost all markets except Brazil and Europe delivered positive returns, including India, for all the liquidity that got pumped out. So overall, it was a very good year from an investment perspective for the market participants. When you come to 21, it is the next slide. It's a mixed bag. You can see that China, the BRIC, Asia without Japan, overall emerging markets and Brazil all have demonstrated negative returns this year. And there are already a handful of countries with positive. The US, of course, leading the pitch there. But importantly, India has been the best performing market in this year. So while FPIs may have been redeeming for the second half, the fact is they are happy FPIs who have booked profits. So why I'm saying this is for them to then come back, they don't have a bad experience in India, to come back to India when the situation is conducive, this should not be a challenge. Moving on to the next slide, right? So all of this surge in liquidity, what has it done to valuations across the world, right? So now when you look at it, the blue line tells you it's the S&P 500. So the US market is where most of the liquidity has gone to pump up the US stock market. That's why those valuations are the highest. This is followed by Europe, right? So the advanced countries, first they give the capital allocation to their own markets, after which you get Japan, which is the topics, and finally you got the emerging markets. But if you see there, post the second wave, Omicron, that kind of scenario, valuations in the comparative markets to the US, which is Europe, top Japan, and emerging markets, has started correcting, but the US has not. So that gap has now widened. So the US market is obviously perceptionally in an overvalued, very high valuation status, whereas emerging market is still trading at a discount to the S&P 500. The next slide tells you about India's valuation with respect to the world and respect to emerging markets. The top green graph that you see is India's premium with the emerging markets, and the blue is the India's premium with the world markets. Both of them are trading positive. It means India has been consistently, almost all of the time, trading at a premium. That is, shows you the India growth story at play. Recently, there has been a correction in both the premium, but very marginal, given the rise that it happened. So India is a darling of the FIIs from our flows. We've got preferential flows and our markets have also preferentially risen, and that's where the valuations are showing the degree of the premium. So the next slide tells you why this premium. Why is India getting a premium? Because a strong projection in our EPS growth from FY20 to FY23, the Nifty EPS is expected to grow at 23% per annum CAGR. So from a level of 542 for the last year to a level of 873 for the year 22-23. So this rapid growth in our EPS anticipated is what is reflecting in those valuations. The next slide will tell you that this growth rate, you see that last quarter was a phenomenal growth rate. That is the April, May, June quarter numbers, right? Because they were coming off a bad previous year, same quarter. After that, it has toned on, but you can see that every quarter on quarter, there's a positive footprint to the Nifty EPS growth, or if you exclude the banks and look at excluding financials also, that also keeps growth. So this is not just, it's a quarter on quarter good story continuing on the earnings front. The next slide tells you that with domestic flows also now coming and supporting and retail direct equity flows also increasing, clearly post the pandemic, the last bit you can see, right? There's been a sharp rise in all the three indices, but the best performing index has been the small cap with a 215% return, followed by mid cap with a 150%, and then the large cap with 120%. But if you look at it from a longer perspective and look at it from December 17, which is the previous slowdown versus this recovery phase, you will see a slightly different story. And then the next slide will demonstrate that to you. In this, we have shown the valuations. And if you look at the valuations, all the valuations have seen a small correction, but they touched the previous peak of December 2017 and then have started correcting. So if you are a believer in the fact that the markets, the previous peak reflected a very optimistic scenario, the market went again, this small correction means that those valuations now look more reasonable, and all the three valuations have shown a small correction. So the next table, next graph will show you that in 2017, right? So I would draw your attention to the table below first, right? In 2017, leftmost part of the table, the Nifty was trading at a forward PE of 17.8, let's say 18. Mid cap was at 24, small cap at 20. Where are they currently 1 year forward? The Nifty has expanded from 18 to 24. The mid cap has reached the previous high of 24. The small cap has also expanded from 20 to 24. So what you can clearly see is that the Nifty P has expanded by 6.5 and the small cap by 4.4. So those are the two things which have preferentially driven. And what have been the driving forces? In the case of the Nifty, obviously it is the FII flows, and with some amount of domestic flows also allocating to large caps. In the case of small cap, it has been the domestic mutual funds buying plus all these Robinhood investors who've been coming in. And let me just tell you that for this 4.4% rise, you need only 10% of the money which went into the Nifty to achieve that kind of a rise, because small caps have very low floating stock. So even a small amount of lot buying, it shows up the share price very sharply. So the effect of very low free float, right, is what is helping those small caps to go up. Right. So from that perspective, I would say that valuations wise, the mid cap looks much more reasonably valued compared to the large caps and to the thing, especially when you consider that the growth rates, right, in the economy, as the domestic economy grows, naturally mid and small cap will show much better earnings growth. Next slide, please. So overall, to summarize the market situation, right, the risks for the market, right, are the Fed tapering, right, if there's a policy mistake there or not, and then the runaway inflation that's happening in the US, which has made the Fed advance that tapering. So these are the two key risks. And then when you now look at what the markets are focusing on as the major items, the next slide will show you that Fed obviously is top of mind. Commodities, on the back of what happens if China gives a stimulus, will commodities get a boom? If the US implements their infrastructure plan, will the commodity get a boom? That's another thing. Of course, Omicron and the wave, Delta wave, how they progress are a key concern. And other factors are all dependent on these factors are of much lower point of view, right? With that, I think I come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.